I don't think it was wrong, but it's anyway. Are you recording this now?
I just hit the record button.
Hello.
Hello, everybody. Good evening. We're here. I'm going to call this the faculty lounge, but it's not. It's Jamey and I in both of our living rooms. I'm in the living room at my home. Jamey is at the living room at her parents' home because Jamey has been sick for 5 days now. And you're showing a lot of the symptoms of COVID-19. So why don't you start by telling us how you're doing?
As I'm touching my face, which no one
As
is.
well, it's your face right now, and you've already got something. So go ahead and touch it all you want.
Yeah, no one is here except for Billy, who is over on the sofa.
Hello, Billy.
Hi, hi, Billy.
Hi, Billy. Billy.
She is very excited to be here tonight.
Yes.
Um,
Billy went to the
so
vet today.
yeah, Billy went to the vet today, but she's okay. So that's really all that,
Yes.
Anyway, so I last weekend developed a little bit of a cough, seemed like no big deal, but just as part of the active or the monitoring we were doing, because I work with sick people. I'm a nurse practitioner, family practice. Was checking my temperature a couple times a day, and Sunday spiked a fever. So I have been in isolation since then. Monday, I felt really, really, really horrible. Had a fever all day, only about 100, but really felt just absolutely lousy. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, no fever, felt just weak and really tired, but no big deal. Cough actually seemed to be going away. Yesterday, didn't cough much at all. Woke up this morning, no temperature, felt pretty good. Actually worked today via the computer. And then in the afternoon, I was like, man, I am really tired. Didn't think anything about it though, because it was my first day, up and moving a lot. So anyway, when it was time for me to take my temperature for the 4 p.m., because now I'm doing active monitoring, I have to send my temperature and my symptoms in twice a day. Took my temperature, it was back up to 100. So I am back where I started, unfortunately.
It's not fun.
No, it's not fun. My cough is coming back.
And if you pay attention to the COVID-19 symptoms, if you've got COVID-19, tomorrow and Saturday could be really rough days for you.
It is what it is at this point. I'm pushing fluids and I'm trying to stay rested, and I'm trying to, be as positive as I can on this. There's nothing else I can do. I asked my healthcare provider, for a Z-Pack or something, and they basically said, yeah, we'll do whatever you want, but it would be nice to know what you have. And, that's kind of more than a little frustrating because, wouldn't we all like to know what I have? And of course, the story of the time right now is that there's no way to test me for it. I really don't meet criteria for any other testing at this point, unless they wanted to do like a flu swab. But guess what? We don't have flu swabs right now either. So
how does this make you feel right now to, as a provider, as a nurse practitioner, as a frontline person in the fight against COVID-19, how does it make you feel that you can't get tested? And then you hear the president say that we're testing more than anybody ever.
Well, the president is not my hero right now, to say the very least. And, I don't want to make this political because I don't think it's a necessarily a political type of thing. And, for anybody watching this, wondering what I'm doing walking around, I'm trying to turn my parents' lights off. And there's like 10,000 light switches. And it was backlit, so I was trying to fix that, and I cannot get these lights off. If you've ever been in someone's house and you're like, oh my God, Anyway, that's what I'm doing, and I apologize for the distraction.
Okay, so this afternoon you sent out a question. You started asking people if they had questions about COVID-19. Right
Okay.
now, you're still feeling good enough to answer questions, which
Yeah.
is good. So I'm going to start asking some of the questions that you got.
Okay.
Number one, can you get reinfected if you get COVID-19?
Well, okay. So, with other coronaviruses, there is not, or there frequently is not lifelong immunity. Um, However, there's immunity for some period of time. This is a question that a lot of epidemiologists, virologists, they're all kind of debating this right now. The general consensus is that there will be immunity for some period of time, be it months to years to decades. I think it's safe to say most of them think, yeah, we're going to have immunity for a year, a couple of years. You have some outliers that are saying it's going to be many decades, and you've got some outliers saying, 3 months. But I think most of the rational virologists feel like we're going to have immunity for more than a year and quite possibly years.
Okay.
So, in other words, what this means is almost everybody is on board with you're going to have some lasting immunity for a period of time period. So these people who are saying that folks are getting reinfected and so forth, it's too soon for that. We've only known about this disease since the end of December. Anybody who has fully recovered from COVID-19 at this point in time really should have immunity built up. You shouldn't see reinfections at this point unless there's a problem with their immune system, and it's possible someone who's immune compromised or doesn't have a strong immune system, it's possible that their body don't build up the antibodies necessary for memory.
Tell me about the updates that you're seeing on the vaccine trial.
Really not much to update. It's underway. They've injected several people, and they're basically waiting to see, if any adverse effects occur.
Okay, Dr. Fauci was also talking today about he's not changing any timeline, but they're trying to do some stuff like if they start testing it, they're going to mass producing it. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But if it does, it'll be ready to go. I heard him say that today. Here's one that you hear all the time, and you're hearing from a lot of particular people. Is the flu worse?
Is the flu worse? COVID-19 is worse than influenza. It's got a higher mortality rate, no matter whose mortality rate you want to go with. I think best case scenario right now is Germany has around a 0.5% fatality rate. And we think probably that's because they have had an extremely robust testing program. Basically in Germany, there is no federal lab that runs and tells everybody else what they can and can't do. So all of the independent labs, when China released their the genetic sequencing so that people could make labs or countries could make labs in mid-January, Germany jumped right on it, and their labs were ready to go with testing, which is we know so critical. But because of that, they have caught milder cases, most likely that other countries aren't catching, simply because they're only testing sicker people. But even in that best case scenario where maybe not every single person's been tested, but an awful lot of the majority of symptomatic people in Germany have been tested. And their fatality rate is around 0.5%. So even going with that, that's significantly higher than the average seasonal flu, which has a mortality rate of around 0.1%. There are countries with significantly higher mortality rates, again, maybe because they're testing only, the sickest people. But Italy and Spain have been hit really hard with this. So, again, best case scenario indicates that this appears to have a higher mortality rate than influenza.
Could
You
you?
know, the other thing that's telling about this, and I was having a conversation, I hate to break in, but it's important. Like during heavy flu seasons, yes, we see situations where they put the pop-up tents outside, you know, and they're doing the rapid tests outside in the parking lots of the ERs and things like that. We're seeing that happen some with COVID-19. But I think the telling thing is it's pretty rare when you hear that morgues can't keep up with dead bodies demand. And so like Spain has had to open their largest ice rink to serve as a temporary morgue. And Italy is having problems also with what to do with all the dead bodies. That is something that you do not see in a typical flu season.
Okay. All right. Could exposure to canine coronavirus provide some cross protection?
Don't think so. Of course, this is not something that's been studied, but you know, coronaviruses in general account for 5 to 30% of the common colds each year, and you know, we've all been exposed to that and should have some even you know at least short-term immunities to that, and it does not appear to be helping in this situation or enough that it's anything obvious. So no, do not think that exposure to canine coronavirus or any other coronavirus for that matter is particularly helpful.
All right. Here's one that I think is a really important question to ask. Do you think that COVID-19 will have the same death toll as the flu?
Well, I think to some extent we are, it depends on how we manage this. You know, it depends on how many people actually catch this. Gosh darn it, you know, if we did what China did with Wuhan and Hubei province, I think that we'd have a fighting chance not to see the same type of toll that influenza takes. But at the rate we're going now, without really strict containment and testing measures, and measures even, when I say, you know, we didn't do what China did, we also didn't do what South Korea did in terms of testing. If we could all do what they did, we'd have a chance of mitigating some of the impact of this. But as it stands right now, very hard to compare influenza and COVID-19 head to head, because COVID-19 has only been in existence since the end of December, and we really didn't know about it en masse until mid-January. You know, so flu has so many months head start on us, but at the end of the day, I think that there's going to be a huge toll from COVID-19.
We were talking earlier about the virus and the vaccine for it. Do you think that a COVID-19 vaccine would be anywhere or anything like the flu vaccine?
You know, we really don't know at this point. You know, it's one of those things that, again, one of the first vaccines is just now being trialed. So we have to wait and see what that is like. We also have to wait and see how stable COVID-19 remains genetically. Right now, there's not a lot of indication that there's any type of rapid mutation going on. So again, there's things that we need to know about in terms of whether or not the vaccines that are being developed work and are effective and safe and that type of thing. And we do have to be careful in development. Yeah, we need to fast track this to a degree because we have a crisis now and lives are being taken now. But of course, the last thing that you want is an unsafe vaccine. So we have to be careful, you know, to, yes, do this as quickly as we can, but safely. Once we know whether or not the current vaccine is going to be effective, and that's probably going to take a year to 17 months from now, honestly, as much as I hate that. It'll be great if I'm wrong, and I hope I am. I hope it takes, you know, 6 months, 9 months, but it's, no matter what, it's going to take time. The rotavirus took more than like 25 years to develop. I mean, you know, vaccine development from a brand new vaccine doesn't happen overnight. But then beyond that, is it going to have to be modified every year once we have that footprint in place? We don't know. That's something that we're going to have to take a wait and see approach. Influenza mutates enough every year that a different vaccine is made every single year based on a forecast. Coronaviruses in the past, SARS and MERS being the two other deadly coronaviruses, didn't really survive long enough to know, but it didn't appear that there was tons of mutation there either. But again, neither of them lasted long enough for us to know long term, is this thing going to mutate? And there never were vaccines made for either of those.
Okay.
Not that we're in mass anyway, let's put it that way. I don't believe that there were vaccines at all.
I'm reading this question and I don't really understand it, but I'm going to ask it to you anyway. Should I avoid using my solvent with the COVID-19 issue?
Flovent, I think is what.
Okay, Flovent. What is
yeah,
Flovent?
I think, so first of all, Flovent is a medication for asthma, and asthma is a disease of inflammation. And those who have chronic asthma, that's not controlled with just like allergy type medicine or things like that and so forth, get put on a steroid inhaler. That is a good question for your pulmonologist or whoever handles your asthma treatment. I'm just guessing where that question came from is that there was a study, I'm not even sure if it was a study, but there was something published that said, hey, corticosteroids might not be such a great idea in COVID-19. Early on, the Chinese had mentioned that, no, we're not recommending steroids as part of routine treatment in COVID-19. And I thought at the time, there must be an outcome issue with that because oral steroids are used so frequently in respiratory illness. And then there was an article published, not necessarily in a scientific journal, although I do believe it was an editorial in a scientific journal that kind of threw out this hypothesis that maybe steroids aren't all that great. I believe it was the Lancet, but I would have to go back and look. Anyway, bottom line is we don't know for sure that oral steroids are a problem for COVID-19. There's arguments on both sides, and I think the question is, or the deal is that, of course, that's something that's going to be studied and we'll know more about it. But I certainly would not, as an individual, read an article like that and then decide on your own, oh my gosh, I'm going to stop my Flovent, because an inhaled steroid is different than one you take orally and has different implications in terms of disease process and how the inflammation is, how the body is affected by the steroid and so forth. Yes, they're both steroids, they both decrease inflammation, but the oral steroid is much more potent in terms of systemic absorption. And again, there probably is a role for oral steroids in certain cases with COVID-19, and there may or may not be concerns with their use in all cases. We just don't know. But I will say this, it's very important for people to keep their asthma under control right now, because asthma does place you at higher risk for complications and death from COVID-19. So you really do need to call your primary care provider or whoever manages your asthma and discuss with them your current asthma situation, where you're at in terms of symptoms and things like that, so that you guys can maximize your treatment and make sure that your asthma is under really good control right now. So again, I hate to totally pass the buck on that one, but that I think is going to be discussed with your provider.
Now, you may not have the answer to this one. I'm kind of just throwing it out at you. And I've seen some things in newspaper articles, but I haven't seen anything in, medical articles, because that's your area. What about albuterol?
Albuterol is, it just relaxes the airway or kind of makes the airway bigger. So it just opens it just a bit or relaxes it, but it does nothing for the underlying inflammation. So asthmatics use their albuterol as needed, and generally their steroid inhaler more routinely, although there has been some changing guidelines and recommendations more recently in terms of, for some folks, Advair as needed may be okay, but that's really getting down into the fine tuning of in the art of medicine.
Okay.
And again, needs to be decisions like that. I'm not saying everybody can use their Advair as needed. If you've been told to use it routinely, there's a reason for that, and you need to do what your primary care provider or your pulmonologist or whoever's managing your asthma, you need to do what they tell you to, because there's reasons for it.
Okay, I've already had my flu vaccine, and some people are asking if you have your flu vaccine and your pneumonia vaccine, could that lessen the impact of COVID-19?
It will do nothing for you in terms of preventing COVID-19. What it will do is hopefully keep you from catching both COVID-19 and influenza at the same time, which is like, sounds horrible, but that can happen. David Abel, who's on the Diamond Princess, and caught COVID-19, and his wife Sally, both had COVID-19 and also had influenza at the same time. Luckily, they both survived, but they became, especially David, became very, very sick. So anything you can do to prevent influenza is a good thing. And, hey, if you haven't gotten your flu shot yet this year, if there's still flu vaccine around you, it's not too late to get the flu vaccine. It would have been better to do earlier on in the year, but it's okay to get it now, and I would recommend it if you haven't gotten it. Pneumonia vaccine won't do anything in terms of COVID-19 prevention. COVID-19 can cause a viral pneumonia, and the pneumonia vaccine will not prevent that either. But what it can prevent is some of the secondary, the very dangerous secondary bacterial pneumonias that can occur. There may be some protection in that regard. Again, this all comes down to do every single thing you can to keep from getting any type of illness right now, because you don't want to have an illness on top of an illness, right? So if you're due for your pneumonia shot, definitely get that. There's another pneumonia shot called Prevnar. Discuss this with your healthcare provider, as well as the influenza vaccine. There's another vaccine, tetanus, diphtheria, and pertussis. If you're not up to date on that, you should get that as well, because pertussis being the whooping cough or the 100-day cough, you don't want to catch that right now either.
Okay. What if someone has had their spleen removed? How is that? How vulnerable are they to COVID-19?
So you can survive without your spleen, but it is important for immune function. So we consider anybody that's had a splenectomy or their spleen removed, we consider them to be somewhat immune compromised and at high risk for complications from any type of illness. So they would be in a high risk category. So they definitely need to be taking really strict precautions and staying home unless absolutely necessary at this point.
Flu isn't containable, but COVID-19 is. Why?
So yeah, the World Health Organization has really stressed this. And that's a really complex answer. There's a lot of different reasons behind that, but one of them, possibly the biggest one, is this fact that people with influenza tend to be very symptomatic just prior to symptom onset. And while people with COVID-19, it is known that they can transmit COVID-19 maybe a day or two before onset, it's not thought to be the main driver of transmission. So more simply put, people are most contagious, we think, and there's a lot of evidence to support this. People are most contagious, right when their symptoms start and while they're symptomatic. That makes COVID-19 a lot more easy to contain than influenza. The other thing, you know, it also has to do with, we think, particle size and how long the droplets stay aloft in the air and things like that. And, you know, influenza is not containable to the point that it's not even attempted, versus in the areas that have really done strict containment on COVID-19, it's shown that it's been possible. We saw that in Wuhan, where they locked down, you know, the entire city in Hubei province, 60 million people plus, quarantined, and they contained the illness. Now they're seeing cases being imported back into the country, but they're really not seeing a great number of new native cases. South Korea had the same experience where they really went to hardcore testing and isolating sick people and people that they have been exposed to. Their case numbers dropped dramatically. And it's just not as possible with influenza.
Okay. And then the last thing is, you know, the idea of masks, because I know that providers right now are short on masks and respirators and other PPEs and everything that they're needing to actually treat people. And I've seen all of these things about homemade masks. I actually saw a video today where a person put men's underwear around their face, wrapped it around their face twice, and said, "Hey, look, I got a mask." Are there benefits to wearing guys' underwear?
It's a guy's underwear. You know, I think the underwear is definitely questionable because it's so
Porous.
porous, you know, yeah. And the more you stretch it, the bigger those pores get. You know, one of the most heartwarming things about the COVID-19 situation is the fact that so many people are running to their sewing machines and they're making these homemade masks. You know, we've got the whole like mask cavalry at home, you know. Unfortunately, this may not be as good of an idea. There have been two studies that I found today that have researched this. One was in published in 2013, the Journal of Disaster Medicine and Public Health Preparedness. And the other study was done in 2015 and was published by the British Journal of Medicine. The 2013 study showed that commercial surgical masks, not the N95 masks, just the regular masks that are not nearly as good as the N95 masks, were 3 times more effective than homemade masks. They found that there was benefit to both, but the benefit with the homemade masks was not nearly that of the you know, regular surgical masks. Even more concerning was the study in the British Journal of Medicine that was done in 2015 actually showed that cloth masks were far worse than surgical masks, and actually did worse than the control group. And what the control group was like standard precautions, which meant that providers sometimes wore a surgical mask, you know, like whatever mask they would typically wear. And sometimes they didn't, and they just used like standing 6 feet away and things like that. So it was like they were following their standard protocols for masks, which means, you know, we don't wear masks typically for every patient we see. And the cloth mask did worse than the control group, which was that, you know, standard of care group. So the penetration of particles with the cloth mask was 97%. So it was, you know, from a particle penetration standpoint, it was only 3% better than nothing. And the surgical mask, by comparison, had only a 44% penetration percentage. And they actually found that people got sicker when they were using the cloth mask than in the control group or the surgical mask group. And they felt that that was because the cloth masks were getting reused. And then also there was only this, you know, 3% benefit with perfect use, but also the fact that cloth masks tend to absorb moisture which becomes kind of a breeding ground and also makes the mask less effective to begin with. So
Okay.
homemade masks may not be such a good thing. I think, you know, the bottom line with both of the studies, interestingly, was that, you know, a homemade mask might be better than nothing. The first study, certainly, they felt that they definitely had better outcomes with homemade masks, that, you know, like it was helpful. In the second study, actually, there's an argument that can be made that maybe there wasn't beneficial, and possibly people got sicker when they were wearing them.
Okay. All right. That's what we've got, folks. Thank you very much for watching. We're going to try to put this up on YouTube. We are going to try to do this as long as Jamey is capable and she doesn't get sick. Hope. We're going to try to do this over the weekend. We'll try to bring in Dr. John Blakeman. I've got a few other people that I think it would be interesting to bring in. Some people down in Carbondale, some people down in other places who might be able to give us a different perspective from a different part of the country. So we'll be working on that.
You know, we should try to get Dr. Martin.
I was already planning on that, but I didn't want to tell everybody on Zoom or on YouTube that we want to do that. But yeah, I think it'd be a really good idea to talk to Dr. Kurt Martin down in Carbondale.
Yeah, super smart.
Yes. And we need to talk to smart people about this. I'll be talking with some people at Milliken to talk about what's happening at Milliken, and we'll be trying to bring this to you on a fairly regular basis via Zoom until Jamey is healthy and home and we can go back to doing it on Facebook Live. So until then, thank you all very much for watching us here on the Faculty Lounge, and we will be back as soon as we can. Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye-bye.
That was good.